standing on my own porch at 72 years old, locked out like a stranger. My own daughter thought she could throw me away like yesterday's newspaper, but she forgot one very important detail about whose name was on the deed. This house. Harold bought it for me 43 years ago when Sarah was just 7. I remember that summer day when he handed me the keys, his weathered hands trembling with pride. "Every woman deserves a home that's truly hers, Eleanor," he said, making sure the deed was in my name alone. Harold was old-fashioned in many ways, but he believed a woman should never be at anyone's mercy when it came to shelter. Even after he passed 5 years ago from that stubborn heart of his, this place remained my sanctuary, my fortress of memories. The mortgage was paid off 20 years ago. Harold worked double shifts at the steel mill to make sure of that. "I want you to sleep easy knowing this roof over your head belongs to nobody but you," he'd say, counting out those monthly payments at our kitchen table. "Every room in this house holds pieces of our life together. The master bedroom where we held each other through good times and bad. The kitchen where I cooked Sunday dinners for 30 years. The living room where we watched Sarah take her first steps, where we celebrated her graduation, where we cried together when her marriage fell apart. When Sarah went through her divorce 2 years ago, I opened my doors without hesitation. She was broken, defeated, with 2 young children, and nowhere to turn. Her husband had been cheating for months, spending their savings on his secretary. "Come home," I told her over the phone, my heart breaking at the pain in her voice. "Bring Emma and little Jake. We'll figure it out together." I meant every word. Family takes care of family. That's how Harold and I were raised. At first, it felt like a blessing. The house came alive again with children's laughter echoing through the halls. Emma, now 8, would curl up with me on the sofa reading bedtime stories. Jake, barely 4, would follow me around the garden, his tiny hands helping plant tomatoes. Sarah seemed grateful then, helping with groceries, cleaning the house, making dinner some evenings. "Mom, I don't know what I would have done without you," she'd say, and I felt useful again, needed. But somewhere along the way, gratitude turned into entitlement. It started small, almost unnoticeable. Sarah began rearranging my furniture without asking. "This needs to go here, Mom. It looks better." Then she started throwing away my belongings, my collection of ceramic birds that Harold gave me every anniversary. Gone. "Mom, this clutter is embarrassing. What if someone visits?" The someone she was referring to was David, a man she'd been seeing for 6 months, who treated my home like his personal hotel. The changes accelerated. Sarah painted over the wallpaper in the guest bathroom that Harold and I had chosen together. She replaced my kitchen curtains with something modern and cold. When I protested, she'd sigh dramatically. "Mom, this place needs updating. You can't live in the past forever." But I wasn't living in the past. I was living in my home, surrounded by the things that made it mine. The disrespect grew bolder. Sarah started making household rules, telling me when I could watch television, what I could cook in my own kitchen. "The smell of fish makes me sick, Mom. Can't you eat something else?" She criticized how I disciplined Emma and Jake when they misbehaved, undermining my authority as their grandmother. When David stayed over, which became more frequent, they'd take over the living room, making me feel like an intruder in my own space. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in March. I'd woken up to find Emma and Jake jumping on my antique sofa, the one Harold's mother had given us as a wedding gift. The springs were already weak, and I could hear them straining under the children's weight. When I gently asked them to stop, Explaining that the sofa was old and special to me, Sarah stormed into the room. "They're just playing, Mom. God, you're so uptight about everything." Her voice was sharp, dismissive, like I was a bothersome child instead of the woman who owned the roof over her head. "Sarah, I'm not being unreasonable. This furniture has sentimental value, and it's fragile. There's a whole backyard for jumping and playing." That's when her face changed. The mask of grudging respect she'd been wearing for months finally slipped away completely. "You know what, Mother? I think you need some fresh air to clear your head. Maybe a walk will help you remember that things change and people need to adapt." Before I could respond, she was ushering me toward the front door. I thought she was being dramatic, making a point, but when I turned around to come back in, I heard the click of the deadbolt, then the slide of the chain lock. "Sarah, don't be ridiculous. Open this door." But through the window I saw her face, cold and satisfied. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "My house, my rules. Maybe now you'll learn some respect. My house." Those 2 words hit me like a physical blow. I stood there for a moment, waiting for her to laugh, to say she was joking. But she turned away, disappearing into the kitchen. My kitchen, leaving me standing on my own porch like a stranger. I sat on those porch steps for 3 hours, watching neighbors walk by, probably wondering why old Mrs. Henderson was locked out of her own home. Mrs. Patterson from next door even asked if I was all right. The humiliation was unbearable. How do you explain to your neighbor of 20 years that your own daughter has locked you out? How do you admit that you've somehow lost control of your own life? As the afternoon wore on, I realized this wasn't a momentary fit of anger. Sarah was making a statement. In her mind, she'd taken possession of my home, and I was now a guest, who could be dismissed at will, the woman who had changed her diapers, who had walked the floors with her during colicky nights, who had sacrificed and saved to give her a good life, was now being treated like hired help, who had overstepped her bounds. When David's car pulled into my driveway at 5 o'clock, I watched him walk into my house like he belonged there. Sarah greeted him at the door with a kiss, and I could hear her laughing about something. They were in my living room, probably sitting on my furniture, making plans in my space, while I sat outside like a beggar. That evening, staying at my friend Margaret's house, I felt lost and confused. Margaret had been my friend for 30 years, and she was furious on my behalf. "Eleanor, this is outrageous. How can she lock you out of your own home?" But even Margaret didn't know what I should do. Call the police? What would I say? That my adult daughter had locked me out after an argument? But something Harold used to say kept echoing in my mind. The most important papers are the ones you never think about until you need them. Harold was meticulous about documentation. He kept every receipt, every warranty, every important document organized in labeled folders. Someday, Eleanor, these papers might be the only thing standing between you and trouble. Wednesday, morning. I asked Margaret to drive me to First National Bank. My hands were shaking as I opened my safety deposit box. Harold's careful organization still intact 5 years after his death. And there it was, the original deed, filed with the county clerk on July 15th, 1981. Harold's careful signature next to mine, but the ownership line was crystal clear. Eleanor May Henderson, sole owner. Not Sarah, not both of us, just me. 43 years I'd owned this house outright, free and clear. Harold had been so careful about that, insisting the deed be in my name alone. "If something happens to me," he'd said, "I want to know you're protected. Nobody can take your home away from you. Not ever." I sat in that bank vault for 20 minutes, reading and rereading the legal language that proved beyond any doubt that 1247 Maple Street belonged to me. The property taxes I'd been paying from Harold's life insurance money, the homeowner's insurance in my name, every utility bill that came to Eleanor Henderson. How had I forgotten? How had I let Sarah's assumptions become my own confused reality? Thursday morning, I called Robert Carlson, the lawyer who'd handled Harold's will. Robert had known our family for 15 years, and when I explained what had happened, there was a long silence on the phone. "Eleanor," he said finally, "you have every legal right to reclaim immediate access to your property. In fact, your daughter could be charged with unlawful exclusion from your own home. Would you like me to make some calls?" We met Thursday afternoon in his office, the deed spread across his mahogany desk like evidence in a trial. Robert explained my options clearly. I could have Sarah evicted immediately. I could change the locks while she was out. I could call the sheriff and have her removed for trespassing. But I didn't want revenge. I wanted my dignity back. "I just want to go home, Robert. I want to walk through my own front door without asking permission." "Then that's exactly what we'll do, Eleanor, with proper legal backing." Friday at 2 p.m., I returned to my own front door. But this time, I wasn't alone. Robert stood to my right, briefcase in hand, every inch the professional attorney. Sheriff Martinez stood to my left, official and imposing in his uniform. In my purse was a certified copy of the deed, notarized and undeniable. My heart was pounding as I knocked on my own door. Through the window, I could see Sarah in the kitchen, probably preparing lunch for the children. She looked annoyed when she saw me, then confused when she noticed my companions. "Sarah, it's your mother. I have some gentlemen here who need to speak with you." When she opened that door, the smugness drained from her face like water from a broken cup. Her eyes moved from me to Robert to Sheriff Martinez, finally settling on the official documents in Robert's hand. "Sarah Henderson?" Sheriff Martinez asked, his voice polite but firm. "Yes, that's me," she answered, her voice already uncertain. "Ma'am, I need you to understand that you're currently restricting access to property that legally belongs to Mrs. Eleanor Henderson alone. The deed is clear and undisputed." Sarah's face went pale. But I live here. I thought... Mom, you said I could stay here." "I said you could stay here, Sarah. I never said you could lock me out of my own home." Robert stepped forward, his voice calm and professional. "Mrs. Henderson, your mother is the sole legal owner of this property. You have no legal right to deny her access to her own home. In fact, what you've done could be considered unlawful detention of property." Sarah's voice cracked when she spoke. "I didn't know. I mean, I thought since I lived here..." "You thought wrong," I said quietly, finding my voice again. "This has always been my house, Sarah. Always. Your father made sure of that when you were 7 years old." Sheriff Martinez explained the situation clearly. "Mrs. Henderson is being generous by allowing you to remain in the home temporarily. But legally, she could have you removed immediately for trespassing and unlawful exclusion." I watched my daughter's world shift as the reality hit her. For months, she'd been operating under the assumption that she had some claim to my home, some right to make decisions about my life. The truth was crushing her fantasy of control. "Mom," she whispered, tears starting to form. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean... I was just so frustrated, and I thought... You thought you could treat me like a tenant in my own home," I finished for her. "You thought kindness was weakness, and respect was optional." The children appeared in the hallway, curious about the official visitors. Emma looked confused, and little Jake was hiding behind his mother's legs. My heart broke, seeing them caught in the middle of this mess their mother had created. Robert handed Sarah a formal notice. "Mrs. Henderson, you have 30 days to make alternative living arrangements. Your mother has been more than generous, but she has the right to reclaim full use of her property." That evening, as I sat in my living room, my legally documented living room, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace in my own home. The house felt different somehow, like the walls themselves knew the truth had been restored. I could sit on my sofa without permission. I could cook what I wanted in my kitchen. I could watch television without negotiating for the remote control. Sarah barely spoke to me that first night back. She kept the children quiet, probably telling them that Grandma was upset about something grown up that they wouldn't understand. But I could see in her eyes a new awareness, a recognition that she had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Over the next week, we had several difficult conversations. Sarah admitted that she'd started thinking of the house as hers, especially after David began spending so much time there. He kept asking why I let you make all the decisions about decorating and household rules. She confessed. "I guess I started seeing you as controlling instead of generous." "Sarah," I told her, "there's a difference between being controlling and maintaining boundaries in your own home. I welcomed you and your children with open arms. I never charged you rent, never made you feel unwelcome. But I also never gave up my rights as the homeowner." The hardest part was helping her understand how deeply she'd hurt me. "When you locked me out, it wasn't just about the house," I explained. "It was about respect. It was about recognizing that I am still your mother, still a person worthy of dignity, not just a convenient babysitter and landlord." Sarah found an apartment across town by the end of March. The moving process was awkward, but necessary. The children were confused and sad about leaving Grandma's house, but Sarah explained it as time for our own adventure. I helped her pack, even paid the security deposit on her new place. Despite everything, she was still my daughter, and those were still my grandchildren. The house felt empty at first, but it was a different kind of emptiness than loneliness. It was space. Space to breathe, space to make decisions, space to exist without justifying every choice to someone who had forgotten their place. I rearranged the furniture back the way Harold and I had liked it. I hung my ceramic birds back in the kitchen window. I cooked fish whenever I wanted. Slowly, over the following months, Sarah and I rebuilt our relationship. She would bring the children for Sunday dinners, and we'd sit at my kitchen table like a normal family again. But the dynamic had changed permanently. Sarah no longer made suggestions about my decorating or criticized my choices. She asked permission before moving anything, thanked me for meals, helped clean up without being asked. One evening in July, as we sat on the porch watching Emma and Jake chase fireflies in the yard, Sarah brought up that difficult day. "Mom, I want you to know how ashamed I am about what I did. I don't know what got into me." "I do," I replied. "You forgot who you were talking to. You forgot that kindness isn't the same as weakness, and generosity doesn't mean giving up your rights. I also forgot that you're one of the strongest women I've ever known," she added. "Dad always said you had steel in your backbone. Your father was a wise man. He knew that someday I might need to prove it. Now, sitting in my living room on this quiet evening, I think about the lesson in all of this. It's not just about property deeds, though they certainly matter. It's about remembering that every person, especially every elder, deserves dignity in their own space. It's about the difference between gratitude and entitlement, between helping family and losing yourself in the process. I learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply remember who you are and prove it. I learned that legal documents aren't just papers in a safety deposit box. They're shields that protect you when family dynamics go wrong. Most importantly, I learned that you should never let anyone, even family, make you feel like a stranger in your own life. The house still holds all its memories. Harold's laughter in the kitchen, Sarah's childhood echoes in the hallways, the grandchildren's joy in the backyard. But now it also holds something new. The memory of the day I stood up for myself and reclaimed not just my home, but my respect. Sometimes people ask me if I regret being so firm with Sarah, if I should have just talked it out instead of involving lawyers and sheriffs. But I've lived long enough to know that some lessons can't be taught with words alone. Sometimes people need to see the proof, to understand that your kindness comes from choice, not weakness. Share your story in the comments below. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself in a situation where family took your generosity for granted? Remember, being kind doesn't mean being a doormat, and age brings wisdom that younger generations need to respect.